Hello, my friends. This is Andy over the Andy Falco Show, coming to you live from California. I have a great guest. I just put her down as my friend Lisa because she recently had one of those videos. It was really important that everybody needed to see. Of course, that kind of video always gets censored and pulled down. And so I'm trying to be a little bit more cautious. We'll see what ends up happening with this video. Before we get to her and before we get to the great news of what she has to say, and I think it's great news because there's some positive that's coming out of this thing. It's just a lot of people don't want you to hear the positive. But first, let's talk about a couple of my sponsors really quick. I'm just going to give you the URLs and you can go check them out. Today'shappycoffee.com. Today'shappycoffee.com. Since I've been taking it, you may or may not have seen the before and after pictures, but number one, I've been happier than ever. That's why we call it the Happy Coffee. But I've also lost some weight. I can't make any claims that it's because of the coffee, but I can tell you, since I've been drinking the coffee, I am doing really good. Today's CBDoil.com. You know that I had suffered with anxiety, depression, some other stuff. And the same thing. I can't make any claims, but I can tell you, coincidentally, I started taking CBD and wow, I feel great. And so if you want some great CBD, you're going to go to Viseo's. Viseo's is the product, but you go there through today'scbdoil.com. Viseo is one of the top 50 healthcare companies in the world. They make a great CBD using liposome technology, which allows the nutrients to get into your system. And then Viseo has some other great products. So go to today'sviseo.com for some of the other wellness products. All right. So I'm going to bring up my friend. I'm going to drop down my lower third here so we don't block anything of this great guest that we have here. Hey, Dr. Lisa, how you doing?
Hey there. How you doing?
So I bring cloak and dagger, right? We got to kind of bring you in secretly through the back door so that we don't lose our video. What I want to do first, Lisa, as you're from Tampa, or you're in Tampa right now, Tampa Bay, right? Just briefly, or as long as you want to take, give us some of your credentials so that we know why we should even be listening to you.
Absolutely. So I am a triple board certified internal medicine, anti-aging and regenerative medicine, and obesity medicine doctor. And I run a very busy 8,000 patient practice that merges traditional and integrative medicine down here in Tampa. I have been had my finger on the pulse of this COVID-19 pandemic. I felt very called to step up where I hadn't done a lot of kind of daily engagement or a lot of social media until this started. And I just felt like people were lost. They were being led by fear and confusion. And I stepped up, and it started with just, 200 to 400, 500, 600 views. A lot of it was my patients just kind of giving them support, digesting the science, pulling in some spiritual affirmations to just keep them out of fear. And it accelerated to kind of a viral video last week.
Right. And so first I want to address this. We were talking before we came on live about the politicization of the medical field and this whole thing that we're going to be talking about, probably. And that is something also that I've recently began to believe that I don't know that this is about necessarily politics. There seems to be some other evils involved. At least that's how I'm feeling. Like I don't understand how the FDA and other organizations that claim to be, care for us as human beings is blocking information, taking medication that's been used for many, many years. And so, like you were explaining to me that you are shocked by how you were accused of being political, when in fact you were not. You were just trying to give good, sound information and pass on the good news that there may be something out there that might help.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what struck me early on. First, I was just hearing that you're going to die because there's not enough ventilators, and stay in your house or you're going to, kill your grandma or whatever. So there were these extremes, and I don't resonate with extremes, which is why I'm not political. I like to ride the middle. And I sat there saying, who's talking to humanity? Who's talking to the middle? And that's why I started speaking up. So I was had my finger on the pulse, really sticking with the science, with people that I could trust more online than on the mainstream media, because I really was not comfortable with what they were, at least with how they were presenting it. I felt intuitively that there was other agendas underneath the radar. I didn't really know what they were. I just knew that was not something I wanted to engage in as my primary source of information. And what happened that really turned on the bells and whistles was a couple things. One was when they were talking about flattening the curve, and my hospital here was empty, and they were furloughing nurses, and ER docs were getting laid off of their shifts. And patients weren't showing up in the hospital for problems. I had somebody come in with a black toe, and she said she was too nervous to go to the hospital. And it was an emergency. So those types of things where patients, it just, everything didn't make sense. Okay, we're not going to overwhelm the healthcare system, but meanwhile, the healthcare system is taking furloughs, and people are not getting the care they need.
Maybe I just want to interject because there's a couple times I'm a member of Kaiser, and during the beginning of this whole thing, I had called because I felt that it was either myself or one of my children needed to come in to look at something that was not related to the illness. Right. And they said, well, you can't come in right now, and we're not taking any, what do they call it? Not voluntary. What's it called? Coming in for just like a regular checkup. You can't come in. Yeah. And then also I began to hear, well, I think one day I had a cough, right? And so because I was getting kind of like all this information, maybe I should call and see what I got. And so I did. I called Kaiser, and they said, well, we'll make an appointment with an advice doctor. Or it used to be an advice nurse, but now they actually had a doctor talking to me. She went through some of the other symptoms, and she goes, well, I don't think you have that. But if you get worse, then call us. Now, I'm wondering how many other things do doctors tell you, wait till you get worse? Like, we don't do that with cancer, right? Early, signs of cancer are the best thing you can do. I mean, isn't that the way with everything else, that shouldn't you start treating something in the early stages, not wait until maybe you do require a ventilator?
So those are great questions, and I would say, in fairness to what has happened from the beginning, I don't fault them for how they handled it at the beginning. Mm-hmm. Nobody knew what the heck this thing was. Nobody knew how people were reacting. We didn't have strong evidence or ideas of an early treatment. So back then, they were doing the best they could. Everybody thought it was so incredibly contagious that they were trying to protect the environment of the clinical offices. I mean, we never closed our office. Our building was screening people. Mm-hmm. We did have a lot of patients elect to do virtual visits instead of coming in. But the truth is, even as this thing went forward, when the big docs in California, I don't know if you remember that, but there was a handful of doctors that had these urgent care centers, and they were collecting numbers, and their numbers of cases and fatalities were not correlating with what was being presented in the mainstream media. And I always tap in intuitively to people, and I really felt them just being honest and not having an agenda. And then they got censored and criticized. And that was when I really said, I don't know what else is going on here, but I don't like it. And I'm going to keep scouring other sources to find treatments that I could use for my patients if they need it. B, more information about what could be driving this under the radar. And I've just kept that going this whole entire time in terms of like my asking why, because that's what I do.
Yeah. So one thing I want to hit before we get to my main question that I have for you is that you don't also see a lot of people talking about what you can do to mitigate, I guess is the word, the chances of getting it. In other words, how do you boost your immune system? What vitamins can you take and that kind of stuff? And early on, I interviewed you back about a month or two ago. I can't remember how long ago it was. And you gave me a list of vitamins. And then I saw another list of vitamins. And I want to show you that I have the vitamins. and I want to tell you, it's not cheap to have all these vitamins. I got to get your credit card out when you go there. And I will share a graphic that you have on your Facebook page that you created yesterday or later. Yeah. But you have a great, and I loved it because when I had that cough, I go, you know what? They don't want to know, anymore. They don't want me to come in. So what can I do just in case? If I'm in the early stages, what can I do? And I found you. Yeah. I found your website, and then you gave me the list of vitamins, and I feel great. I mean, I feel good. There's a lot of pills to swallow. Yeah. But I wanted to know what is this monolaurin?
So monolaurin is an herb it's a derivative of actually coconut, if you can believe it. It's something extracted from there, but it's got pretty potent antiviral and immune boosting properties. So it's a good one to have around. I leave it in my house if anybody gets a cold. because you can
Okay.
use it for any virus, but it also will just boost your immune system in general too.
Okay, one other one. There's a bunch here, but I didn't know what Wobens and what.
So there were two, on the graphic. It's a preventive regimen, which the most important three would be vitamin D at 5 to 10,000 with food, vitamin C, usually I say 1,000 with meals, and some zinc, about 50 milligrams. Those are the three most important, and then we've got monolaurin and A on there too. They're just more potent antiviral or boost the side of the immune system that fights viruses. A, you have to be careful. You can go too high. You don't want to stay on it long term, but it definitely is good for right now when we were nervous about the potential of catching COVID. The other supplements, including the wobenzyme and the other specific type of vitamin E and turmeric or curcumin and fish oil, when we discovered that there are two predominant phases to infection with COVID-19, there's the early phase and then there's the later phase. The later phase is where you're getting the systemic cytokine storm that most people have heard of. And that's a diffuse inflammatory process that can lead to a lot of end organ issues. So that's why we started seeing, diarrhea and GI symptomatology, some people getting rashes, some people getting neurological symptoms. So in an ideal world, we're preventing this in the first place, which is the regimen that we talked about first. But if you were to start to get more of the systemic symptoms, the things like wobenzyme, which what that does is actually breaks up clotting factors. So when you turn on a systemic inflammatory response, you can get clots. That was one of the symptoms and main complications they were seeing with really sick patients. Wobenzyme goes in and breaks those up for you.
Okay, cool. And I want to remind everybody that's watching, because I see the numbers going up, just go ahead and comment. Everybody's like frozen. Usually I have a bunch of comments by now. Everybody's like just listening to you, apparently. But if you have any questions that I don't ask that you may be interested in, feel free. And another thing I've noticed, some people are afraid to comment because somebody might see that they're liking some information. Like, people are really scared of being canceled. And just one more thing before I get to my main question is, I respect you even more than I did before in the fact that you are speaking out, because doctors are being canceled, right? They're being attacked. They're looking up like they always do. They look back past posts that you had as a teenager and bringing all these kinds of things up. How worried are you that they're going to come after you now that you're speaking out a little bit more?
Well, I choose in my life not to come from fear. I really feel that our job as doctors, through the Hippocratic Oath and do no harm, and somebody has got to stick up and lead, because people are so fear-based right now. It is, in my opinion, one of the primary things that is suppressing the immune system and increasing the actual risk of not only contracting this virus, but of having a worse outcome. So I felt called by my duty as a doctor to quell some of that fear. And in the same way that I stay in light and the love frequency, I just don't entertain the fear that something's going to happen. It was kind of shocking when they censored my video last week. But that is not going to stop me from speaking, because I'm not saying anything that I think is controversial. I'm expressing my experiences, my thoughts, my intuitive approaches and things. So.
All right, cool. All right, I want to be careful. I'm not asking you if there is a cure for this pandemic. I'm going to ask you, do you think there is a treatment for this pandemic?
So I think that there have been a lot of different treatments, which is what's exciting, that have come more recently to the surface. So obviously you've got the very controversial hydroxychloroquine, which is what's being censored and watched the most right now. But there are other drugs. There's an antiparasitic medication called ivermectin that showed some promising results. There is a prescription antiviral, remdesivir, that seems to help in later stages of the virus. And there's a lot of published data coming out on good old-fashioned steroids, and that, especially in that inflammatory secondary phase, how using them both inhaled and oral can really turn things down and help people get through this.
Is there, can you identify any stages of getting the illness where you would use one over the other? Is like hydroxychloroquine, would that be something in the very, like me having a little itchy throat and kind of having some diarrhea possibly? That might be the thing to start with, or is it some other?
Yeah. So that's where the controversy, again, the data is coming out slowly but surely, and we have to really look at where the studies are published and the quality of the study. And one of my passions and goals is to develop a platform where we can have unbiased science be all in a hub. So I'm trying to work on getting that up. For now, I'm just having people go on my website and get on my email list so that we have their contacts so that we can kind of guide them when we have this ready to go. But the studies that I have been able to review so far, it seems that if you get early in the symptoms, hydroxychloroquine is providing the ability to allow zinc to get intracellularly, and zinc is a potent antiviral. And there's about 4 or 5 ways this drug seems to work. So it's also providing a more base environment instead of acidic, and viruses don't do well in base environments. It's helping to prevent the virus from like really attaching to the membrane and getting inside the cell. So it has a lot of different places where it works, including blocking something called glycation, which is where a sugar molecule has to come in. And so from what I can see, that regimen that everyone's heard about that's so controversial is probably the best for early symptoms. But we are still having to be cautious when we prescribe it. When we talk about it, it's being censored, and we need more science, I guess, is the definite buzzword on that for right now.
All right. So what are your thoughts on this? You know, in some states you can't get it, like pharmacies are not allowing doctors to prescribe it, and it's been taken off the shelves, even though it's been around for 50 years or some odd time like that. That it's you know, like any other drug, you could watch a commercial on pharmaceuticals of any kind, and it's a 30-second commercial. The first 10 seconds is on all the good things it can do, and then the rest of it is on all it's going to kill you or give you a heart attack or whatever. So there's no medicine that's perfect. Why suddenly? Because maybe in a test they found somebody that may have some heart problems, but then also they were over prescribing it. I mean, what is this? Is just a little bit of a madness that just seems to be, again, demonizing something, maybe for political reasons, but maybe not, maybe for some other reasons.
So I would agree. When you really look at the background of this medication, it's been out for 65 years, and the fact that it's over the counter in many countries, and believed to be safer than a lot of over-the-counter medicines is fascinating. So it's also relatively inexpensive. So those are very positive things in regards to treating or, you know, early treatment of a pandemic, and even potentially prophylaxis. But there's not enough data to be able to say all of that definitively. So then you're bringing in the art of medicine, as I like to describe it, instead of black and white, you know, left and right, right and wrong. So I think it is that when you go into something in the middle where the science is not totally clear yet, and there were some flawed studies, one that was retracted from the Lancet, then you end up opening space for some of these other secondary gains and agendas, which I don't like even guessing and getting into. So we don't know for sure.
Well, then that brings me to my next question is about this vaccine, one of the several vaccines that are being created right now. 50% of the people don't take vaccines as it is right now in our country. What about a vaccine that's been rushed through? It may potentially also have some side effects. I mean, what makes the vaccine going to be better than maybe some of the treatments that they're canceling? It's very confusing. You got this other thing that's going to be coming in. What are they going to say about this vaccine once it comes out?
Yeah, so talk about a hot topic more than hydroxychloroquine. So I tend to approach it from an arm's length at this point, but I will say most ideally vaccines are having a minimum of 12 to 18 months. A lot of them it's more like 10 to 12 years of research behind them before we can assure safety. And from my standpoint, this virus has been so misunderstood from the beginning. First we thought it stayed on surfaces for 14 days. Now it's a couple hours. The infectivity, the how long people are contagious is still relatively unknown. A study just came out showing that it seems that you're most contagious in the first 5 days of symptoms, but the PCR testing they're using can show positivity for 10 weeks out. So if we can't even really nail down the mechanism of action on how this virus, like what the virus is doing, how can we nail down the V word? Like, that's what I call it, because it seems to me too early, especially when we have some relatively low risk medications to potentially treat it. And we have a whole world of prevention, because we're starting to understand that, metabolic syndrome, diabetes, hypertension, being overweight, what these risk factors are, a lot of them have modalities and treatments that we could be jumping on to really decrease population risk. And we also don't understand where we are in regards to the potential of herd immunity, which would be a way to get people immune without having a vaccine. So there's just a lot of unknowns still.
Yeah, I'm one of those horrible people that don't take a flu vaccine and don't vaccinate my kids. So I'll just throw that out there. But I think I know what the vaccine is. There's a great vaccine, and that is good supplements, good health, and eating good, right, and keeping the weight off. And
well,
that's a vaccine.
No, but one more big one, which is stay out of fear.
Okay. Yeah, your brain and your heart is tied to the wellness in your body. I agree 100% with you. Yeah, I'm sorry I missed. I got to write that down to make sure I add that. But it is. I've seen more fearful people in my, and I'm a former police officer, 21 years. They can't. I mean, just the news, picking up a book, or you say a certain word and they go, oh, and they get all crazy. I got in a fight with, I get in fights with people now that I used to not get in fights with, because of, I want to say, because of, I'm not blaming them. I'm saying because of their fear, right? When I try to give them good news, or, hey, there's some good things coming out in regard to the hydroxychloroquine and supplements that I'm getting from, oh, you don't know, people are going to die. They're dying. So that's going to bring me to my next question. Is Florida soon going to be a state of walking dead? Because what I hear in the news is that it's bad in Florida. People are dying, and it's horrible. How bad is it in Florida?
The case numbers keep going up. I will say, from my standpoint, which is, again, I question everything. My practice of 8,000 patients, I've maybe had confirmed cases, maybe 30 or so. And out of those, one person that was in the hospital. Okay. And I'm supposedly in a hotbed here right now. I will tell you what I have heard a lot of, which was urban legend until last week of, oh my God, I went to go get tested, but I left before I got tested and I still came back positive.
Right.
And then I had a patient tell me last week that her husband's a mailman for 20 years. He and his partner that on the route they make these government employees get tested, and they signed up for the test on one line, and then they were in line for the repeat test. For the actual swabbing test. And his wife called with an emergency and he left. And she told me that a week later, he got notified that he needed to be quarantined because he was positive. And he never gave a sample.
Wow.
So that was it's not a firsthand, but it was pretty close. I mean, this was an older woman who's not sucked into mainstream narratives, who was just telling me a story. And was like, I said, well, what did he say? Did he go and tell them? She was like, well, he took the 2 weeks. He got 2 weeks of paid vacation. Yeah, why not? And so my long answer to your what's going on in Florida, there's clearly been a lot of issues with the actual testing. one of the companies was only reporting positives, so the percentages were way off, and they came out and corrected that. So I've gotten to a place personally where I'm not paying a lot of attention to those numbers anymore because I don't know what to make of them.
I bring this up a lot on the past shows that I've done regarding this and other things that are going on in our world right now. And that is in they're doing the H1N1, 2009, I believe it was, is that, we didn't close our schools, although more children were dying of H1N1 than that have died in California, which is zero of COVID-19. We didn't close our schools, we didn't close businesses, and the administration at that time did not. They stopped testing. Like they said, we're not going to test anymore because we already know it's a pandemic. Why the difference? Why the difference of then they said we don't need to test anymore because we don't need to know who has it. But now this one, we need to test it. Just like that's all you hear. Like needs to be more testing. Millions of tests are being done, but we need more testing. What's the difference?
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. It makes you question who is behind it, who's making these rules, what a potential agenda could be. Because when we've had infectious conditions like this in the past, this is like the first time in history where we've actually isolated and masked up and isolated and social distanced the healthy. It's always been, if you're sick, stay home. That makes a lot more sense. If you're immunocompromised and you are at a high risk, stay home, wear the mask. We don't go around checking everyone for the flu during flu season. Like that's not something we do. So I think it stems from the past that from the fact that we really thought this was a lot more contagious than maybe it actually is. So maybe that's the reasoning behind it, but I don't understand at this stage, and we can still jump on this and get the schools back open. I don't understand at this stage where that has not panned out, the infectivity. There was one big study where they had an asymptomatic person, they tracked 500 of his contacts. And I feel that what happened was there were 6 or 7 people that got like a cold symptom, but nobody converted to a positive test, even people that he was living with. And you hear that a lot too, cases in the home where the spouse doesn't get it. So really you would think by this point that whoever is taking control of this narrative would be changing more to what you said of let's stop testing, like what happened with H1N1, let's stop testing. And I don't have an answer for that one.
All right. But also what we could do is take out all the people that were living in nursing homes in New York. If you just took out those numbers, because I think that skews it, because that was something that should not have happened. Right? Those people should not have, because they were putting, positive COVID-19 patients in with other people that are at that age that are going to most likely to die. And I think that that's another thing, that if you just took those numbers out, that it would drop considerably. Then you have the people that are dying of car accidents that have COVID and they're going down as COVID deaths, and so on. And these numbers, like you said, these inflated numbers, if you just really were to now take each one of them and look at them, okay, that he died of a crash, his head got cut off. And so like you could take that guy out. Like if you began to do that, we would probably see that it's really a lot. I'm not saying a lot to do about nothing, because I know that there's people out there that have people died from COVID-19. I know it's real, and I know people have died from it. But when we're talking about closing down a country, closing down schools, people are going broke. I lost one of my main forms of income because of this whole thing. And I'm hurting too. And I got 4 kids that are in elementary school that cannot go to school. And I have to I'm a single dad. I got to try to figure out, how do I work? And now again, California shut down the schools. There's no way of recovering. And they're really damaging this country with all of this madness. I didn't mean to go on a rant, and I'm sorry, but
no, I think it's important, because when I look at what has caused the divide, and this is, if you guys didn't see my live from today on my Facebook page, I talked a lot about how I don't resonate with extremes. And I'm sitting here trying to figure out where it became political, why people are so divided. And I know a lot of it is just the fear and the uncertainty. So the topics that I see that really need attention are some of the things that have just been presented one way and then shifted another way or left out. So things like the mask wearing, which everyone is now kind of agreeing that maybe the studies are more supportive of the mask versus not, but we didn't know that at the beginning. The surface issue, that it's not on surfaces, but we were all freaked out that it was. The testing that we just talked about, the medication and therapies and IV vitamin C's and the ivermectin, like not just the HQ controversy. But the biggest point, or one of the biggest ones for me, is exactly what you just said, which is the ripple effect. Everything in medicine is a risk-benefit ratio. So not only is it not black and white and not an extreme, because it's the art of medicine where we take all these different pictures and we put, all these different, the symptoms and the person's particular history and their ability to afford a medication or whatever else before we come up with a treatment plan, right? It's a blended approach. So when we look at this, we have to take a look at what the risks are from the benefit of closing the schools and closing the economy, which the benefit is not clear because the benefit was always billed as flattening a curve. And guess what? The medical field has got this nailed. I mean, it's handled.
Right.
Not hearing of places that can't handle it. Even in Florida, yes, my hospital's busier. Yes, there are more people in the ICU. Yes, this is a real virus that has been really bad and killed people. Absolutely. Nobody should be denying that. But when you look at that, okay, so what the benefit of slowing that, which we're already having it covered, versus the risk of millions of people having trauma, the increased suicide, the increased anxiety and depression, the calls I have in my office for Xanax prescriptions, the kids that are traumatized and they're not getting their formative years, they're not with their peers. Frankly, just the lack of hugs. I mean, humans need we need connection. We need touch. And nobody's talking, just like nobody's talking about a lot of these preventive things we can do nutritionally and mindset and exercise. Nobody's talking about these ripple effects and the impact on everything for way longer than this snapshot in time of this virus.
Right. And just in my world, and just kind of back up your point here, is that, like I said before, in California, we have 0 deaths from COVID-19 in children, school-age children. But I know in my personal world, 3 parents whose children have committed suicide in this period of time. So 3. So we far more just in my world. Can you imagine how many are actually having not only committing suicide, but struggling with abuse and child molestation because the teachers who would normally be able to recognize something like that are not seeing the children. And so it's much more than that. And I've already argued. I just got an email from the school board that said, thank you for your information and we'll take it into consideration. That was their big response. And I wrote a letter that had to do with a lot of information. So yes, just to support that. I want to get to Karen Jones had a question here. Are there any recommended supplements for children?
So I don't do a lot of pediatric recommendations, but I will say the one I'm very comfortable talking about is vitamin D. Vitamin D is safe. You can make sure it's probably the most important supplement for everybody. And you can give even newborns about 1,000. So that you can get liquid, put it in some juice, and that's the best one to make sure that they've got on board. Okay.
Amy Felt says, thank you both of you for doing this. And you're welcome. I will do it as often as Lisa will do it. Both Lisa and I, we have those schedules that are just hard to nail down. And I know that you're really busy. And I appreciate your lives that you do on a daily basis so much. Especially the affirmation at the end. That's always awesome. I would love for you to do one at the end before we end this one, if you wouldn't mind. I don't know if you have one handy or not, or one you did this morning.
Sure. Yeah, I did one this morning. I'll pull it over.
But before that, is there something that you really wanted to speak on that I wasn't smart enough to ask you a question about it?
I think you're always awesome and smart, and we're flowing here. No, other than the fact that I think I would love anybody who's hearing this to continue to question the narrative of why it's okay for medicine to be political. I think for me, I didn't go into politics. I went into medicine to heal, and I'm questioning my sources now. I'm questioning, these big bodies, the American Medical Association, all these institutions that have always given me information. And one of my other lives that went fairly viral as well was me just questioning that the hospitals or wherever people are getting tested, if they come back positive, they're just sending them home without recommendations except for call your primary care. Okay, well, I'm a primary care and nobody is telling us how to treat people. So wow. I've had to go under the radar. I've found doctors that are quoting the incredible results they're having in their practices, and that's what I've been prescribing, right? So I will say that in some ways I'm happy that this has happened. In a lot of ways, I think there's some really good things that have happened through this pandemic. People are waking up. People are questioning the narrative where they weren't before. And if some of these different institutions, if they have any kind of corruptness, if the journals do, if CDC or NIH or whatever we're kind of fishing through now, it's like hopefully whatever was not good is coming to the surface, being cleared out so that we can be led by truth, by unbiased science, and continue to have freedom in this amazing country that we live in. That's my passion.
I'm glad you said amazing. It is an amazing country. As much as people want to hate on it, it's an amazing country, and I have no idea why. And that's most of my other shows are about that. But I'm so happy you said that. Really quick, I got a couple questions that came in. I hope you don't mind. Is liquid vitamin D3 good?
Yeah, just make sure that you take D with food.
Okay. Because the food activates the D. Is that something that I heard you say?
No, it's a fat-soluble vitamin. So to be absorbed appropriately, you need a little bit of fats. Usually with a meal, I'll have people take it.
And that's what liposome technology does, right? It surrounds something in fat. And then,
got it.
Hey, look at me. I know stuff.
You're on it.
All right, Christy Davies, we take vitamin C, Reziv, that thing, zinc, and daily in pretty hefty doses. Taking melatonin at night so our bodies get sleep and are able to regenerate. Oh, so that's a statement.
That's all good. Yeah, that all sounds great.
Statement, not a question. Myself, husband, and daughter, and several friends also. All right. So you think that's a good idea?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's sleep. I think the point about sleep, a poor sleep, disrupted sleep, not making sleep a priority is one of the number one ways to trigger high cortisol, which will suppress your immune system. So sleep's super important right now.
All right. Before you get to your affirmation, I just want to remind people that this is what you're seeing right now is a doctor who is tired of the stuff that is going on, who is speaking out. And that has been my message now every day. And I want to remind you that the silence is what is hurting us. People being silent and not speaking out and asking questions. Whether it's a Facebook Live or just simply on the phone calling, your congressman or senator or somebody and beginning to speak. I say, this is not right. Burning Bibles, whether you're religious or not, by BLM is wrong. I mean, it's just wrong. And speaking up and out against these organizations that really do not understand our country. And that is, it should not be allowed. It should not be allowed to burn the Quran. It should not be allowed to burn our flag. It should not be allowed to do any of those things, because again, we live in one of the greatest countries in the world. And all people should be respected. All religions should be respected. And I just appreciate the doctor coming on here and just in her videos and speaking out, and should be an example to all of you. I know some of you are afraid to get fired and canceled, that kind of stuff. But if you don't speak out, then you're still going to get canceled. This country will end the greatness that we had. So anything else besides the affirmation?
I think we hit on a lot.
All right. All right. So what do you have for us, doctor, on an affirmation?
So typically in my lives, I kind of dissect the science for a few minutes. I have been giving people actionable steps that they could start doing at home right away. And then I would end with a positive affirmation, because your subconscious mind can be hijacked by the fear mongering, by the collective fear. And that keeps you in a predominant state being driven by your amygdala, which is our old reptilian part of our brain that really is like a fight or flight thing. When that happens, like we just discussed, your immune system is suppressed. So I love affirmations because they will help reprogram your subconscious. And if you repeat them, maybe several times during the day, and you can do this simply around the house. You can put up like some stickies on your fridge or on your bathroom mirror. Something as basic as I'm happy, I'm healthy, I'm strong. You can get creative. But my affirmation that I will end for all of you guys today is I am a thoughtful, connected, and healthy soul on a quest for knowledge and love. So awesome. I can repeat that. Yeah. If you want me to say it one more time, I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I am a thoughtful, connected, and healthy soul on a quest for knowledge and love.
Says it all. Thank you, Dr. Lisa.
Thank you. You guys have a good one.
Thank you, everybody watching. Make sure and share and subscribe. Share it out. Send it in a private messenger and let people hear what Lisa had to say today. Thanks, guys. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. I know I did.